All right, we are now broadcasting. Thanks everyone for joining. We're going to give everyone a minute to file in here. We've got a bunch of attendees coming in, but once we give everyone a second to log in, we'll get started. Awesome, it's great. We're seeing a bunch of people come in, which is great.
It's fantastic.
They're very exciting.
Yeah, very encouraging. Thank you, everybody.
Well, as we wait for everybody, just so everyone knows, I've included in the chat here a link to Yahyn's offering page on Netcapital where you can find more information about the investment. I'll also refer to that throughout the time today. And if any investors have questions throughout the time for Pierre, please use the Q&A function below and happy to get your questions answered. Looks like we've got a bunch of people in here already, so I think we can get started.
Great.
How's it going, Pierre?
Fantastic. It's been an incredible couple of months, kind of 110 miles an hour. So it's been really, really amazing to see the team progress so rapidly. So couldn't be happier.
That's fantastic. So we appreciate you taking the time today. Just so all the attendees know, my name's Rob Burnett. I'm the Director of Business Development at Netcapital. I'll be hosting today. We have with us today Pierre Rogers, from the CEO of Yahyn. We're going to have a nice long conversation with Pierre about Yahyn, about the company, and we're going to dig in a little bit. So I encourage all investors and attendees to ask any questions they have, again, in the Q&A function, and we will get to them kind of in order as best we can. As a reminder, everyone, Yahyn is currently raising capital and accepting investments from anybody on netcapital.com. You can find a link to their page in the chat here and also in the invite you would receive where you signed up, or you can go to netcapital.com and search Yahyn, Y-A-H-Y-N. So with that, Pierre, again, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for allowing me this opportunity. This is really fantastic. And please, anybody who wants to ask any questions, my favorite thing to do in the whole world is talk about my company. So please dig in, ask tough questions, ask easy questions. I don't care. I just love what I'm doing. So but more is fantastic.
Perfect. Well, to kick it off, why don't you just give us a brief overview of the company?
Certainly. So Yahyn seeks to positively disrupt the three-tier system in the wine industry. And by doing that, there are two problems that sort of emerge. And we'll take those and break them apart. So on one side, you've got wineries. So these are boutique, mom and pop vineyards, kind of small to mid-size, that really struggle to break into the three-tier system. And for those of you who don't know what the three-tier system is, that's when a wine goes from a vintner to a wholesaler. A wholesaler brokers it off to restaurants, or more specifically Costco, Whole Foods, liquor stores, etc. And so you have multiple steps in between in terms of the distribution process in order for you, the customer, to find that wine at your Costco or Whole Foods or Vons or wherever it is that you buy your wine. Now, there's a big problem with that because all the margin goes to the middlemen. You, the customer, end up paying more, and the vineyard ends up making less. So that doesn't really work. But more importantly, most of those boutique vineyards never make enough volume to actually even get into those platforms, right? The Costcos and the Vons and what have you. So I would sort of challenge all the users out there and just go, hey, wherever you go grocery shopping and you pick up a bottle of wine every once in a while, you'll notice that no matter what grocery store you go to, what Costco you go to, the overlap between selection at all of those various locations is really, really high, which means there's a bunch of great wines out there that just can't get in front of you. You just simply don't have access to them. And there's a whole regulatory and compliance hurdle that you don't care about and that the vineyard doesn't want to deal with that Yahyn does. And so we enable small to mid-sized boutique wineries direct access to customers. We handle all the compliance, regulatory, all of that stuff for them, which gives them access to you and you access to them. But there's still one more problem. The problem is you haven't heard of a lot of these. You don't know what they taste like. And so what's interesting here is we applied artificial intelligence technology, and this is super cutting edge stuff, where you, the customer, answer a handful of non-wine related questions. And the AI will actually tell us what your profile is, what your palate preference are, and will match that against wines that we test in a laboratory. And so that the likelihood that we give you a very strong recommendation is incredibly high. Let's define what high is. But 94% of the time, our customers say that with a wine that we recommended them, they'll buy it again, which to me is the ultimate vote of confidence, right? You'd buy it again. And so how do we disrupt the three-tier system? We do it, number one, by disrupting the middleman and getting these great mid-size and small boutique wineries directly to you, the customer, giving you access by handling the compliance and regulatory burden. But also on the other side, from the user's perspective, we empower you to be able to, with our recommendation engine, for you to take a chance and try some of these wineries you might not have heard of before.
Thanks, Pierre. And so I really want to dig into the product today, but before we get there, can you talk to us about your team? Kind of what are the backgrounds? Who have you put together to make this thing work and happen?
Yeah, so I'm super, super proud of our team. So thank you for asking that question. It's probably the thing I am the most proud of that we've built so far. So when you look at myself, I have a venture background. So I came from financial services originally, went into venture capital, invested in, heard a million pitches, worked with thousands of entrepreneurs, some that succeeded, some that failed. And so it was a great lesson for me to really understand what works, what doesn't work, what paid attention to, what not to, how to lead a successful team. So from there, I brought on Joshua Levitt. Joshua Levitt, former controller at Bauer, the publicly traded sports equipment manufacturer, and then went on to be the finance director at a large venture capital fund. Just an absolute rock star there. Robert is our CTO. So Robert's had multiple exits, first employee at a handful. I don't want to bore everybody with his bio. You can read it in our deck, but just tremendous experience working at the startup level all the way through either going public or acquisition multiple times. So a ton of experience there. And that's the core team of C-suites. We brought over Toril. Toril's our new project manager from a construction and building background. And so she's been instrumental in getting new vineyards integrated onto the platform. Stu Bossum has headed up our biz development side of things. Stu's actually been in the wine import-export business for over 2 decades. And so he brings a ton of relationships and experience there and has been instrumental in helping us. Next, you've got on the marketing side, you've got Jack Ambrose, who's worked with everybody from Von Dutch Yacht to Louis Trey to Pagani and Rolls Royce. So ultra luxury brands, he brings that experience. And then Yves is our head of PR, and he's just done incredible things for getting our name and messaging out there. He's had 30 years of experience in marketing and PR. So his relationships run really deep, and that's been super valuable to us. One thing I would say is our board. Our board is, I'm just blown away by the power of our board and how intelligent and helpful everyone is. So you've got our lead investor, John Cooper. So John was the founder of a company called Ebu, who exited to Canopy for just shy of $500 million. He is the GP at Evolution Ventures and again, our lead investor. So from a founder to exit experience, he's been incredibly valuable and helping us walk through those steps. Next, you have Pam Hamlin. So Pam, strong female voice that we were looking for on the board, a huge marketing background, former president of Arnold being one of the largest marketing companies in the United States. So she has been very helpful in guiding our branding and our messaging and making sure that we're speaking to the right audiences. Next, you have Todd Nestor. So Todd, former CFO for various firms, used to be Treasury Secretary at Pepsi, went on to become the architect behind the Grey Goose and Bacardi merger, which at the time was the largest in the spirits world. So you can see some huge advantages there. And then lastly, Chris Ludacris Bridges. Yes, that Ludacris, as I like to say, rap star, Fast and the Furious franchise. Yes, he's all those things. He's also a wine lover and a dear friend. But what a lot of people don't know about Chris is he's an entrepreneur. So he's got a cognac brand clothing line, record label, a restaurant chain. I mean, the guy just keeps going, and he's been in the public spotlight for 2 decades. Super creative, keeps us relative, and frankly, a really interesting thinker. And so his creativity comes through, and he challenges us, and so we really appreciate him. So that's the team in a nutshell.
That's really exciting.
Yeah.
So, can you talk to us as we get back into the product? Start with what's the problem you're trying to solve? You talked about it a little bit in the overview, but let's kind of dig in a little bit. And what are the issues in the industry that you're trying to tackle?
So from the consumer side, and my guess is most people on this would care more about what the consumer cares about than necessarily the vineyard. So we'll start kind of there. Is one of the biggest issues that we see around you, the consumer, choosing a bottle of wine is how you will go about doing that. So let's say that a little bit differently. 78% of consumers, when they buy wine, make that decision on just 2 factors. Number 1, brand awareness. Have I ever heard of this brand ever before? 2, the aesthetic of the bottle. How pretty is it? Well, the problem with both of those things is they have nothing to do with what it actually tastes like, right? I mean, that's kind of a crazy thing. You're literally judging a book by its cover. And so why is that? And when you think about how wine is marketed to you, and this is whether it's digital or whether it's in store, doesn't make a difference. It's sold to you on 2 data points, price and rating. Well, the problem with that is we've thrown so many ratings at so many people, we frankly don't really care who gives the rating, we just care what the number is. So every liquor store or online store or wine store, they just put the highest rating of whoever. So they've completely commoditized the value of a rating system, number 1. And number 2 is price. Well, let me ask you, when it comes to wine, do we only care about price and rating? If we as consumers only cared about price and rating with everything that we bought, then everybody would just buy a Toyota Corolla, right? It's got the lowest price to the highest rating, and that's what we would buy. But this is wine, right? Wine is celebratory, it's emotional, it's romantic, it's intimate, it's a time to celebrate with friends and family, promotions, weddings, a good conversation with friends. It's a completely wrong way of marketing this thing. You care as a customer about the story, how it makes you feel, who you're with when you're enjoying it. That's the key difference with wine. And we also, as consumers, always know or always feel in our gut that there must be wine out there that costs less that we like better, right? We don't just have to buy the most expensive bottle to have the best experience. And many of us have had inexpensive bottles that have been fantastic experiences. But how the heck as a consumer do we figure those out? Well, that's the unique power of Yahyn, is through our partnership with Tastry, who is a sensory science company, using AI, doing a chemical analysis of each and every bottle in each and every vintage, I might add, against your individual flavor profile. Now, empirically, this isn't subjective, this is objective, you know that you will like this bottle of wine. So let me put it differently. I'll give you a sort of a personal example. So I love Caymus, right? Wagner family, Caymus Cab, you can buy it everywhere. I really, really like it. What I don't like is the price. It's $80 a bottle, $85 a bottle. I can't afford to drink that every week. Heck, I can barely afford to drink that once a month. So I would love it if somebody could tell me, hey, if you like Caymus, you're going to like this other bottle better. But because you haven't heard of it, and because it's not carried in Vons and isn't in the 3-tier system, you can find that bottle for $35. Hey, now we're talking. I get something I like just as much, if not better. But because it doesn't have the big brand and Costco doesn't have to get it mark up with the 3-tier system, now I can get it for $30 or $40 a bottle. Man, I am in. And that really, if we, there's nuts and bolts behind all of this, of course, but ultimately that is our goal, the problem we're trying to solve with Yahyn.
That's fantastic. And I think that's a really perfect transition into, let's talk about the solution. So, as I understand it, this is really a 2-sided marketplace, creating solutions for both consumers and for the vineyards, correct?
That's correct.
And so let's start with the consumer side again. So you talked about Tastry. Can you tell us more about that?
Yes.
Who they are, what that is?
Absolutely. So Tastry is located in San Luis Obispo. They are a sensory science company. So what does that mean? They have a lab, vineyards, ourselves, etc. submit wine to them for a chemical analysis of that wine, breaking the flavors of that wine into different categories, of which there are quite a few. Then they apply their AI software, which is in part by us and a lot by them, in which we take client data, customer data, individual customer data, not cohort, not, hey, you're 35-year-old male living in Boston data. That's not useful. What Rob specifically likes, by filling out this questionnaire, by filling that out, it's a handful of questions, it filters you into 150,000 different flavor profiles, right? So based on your answer, we've identified 150,000 different flavor preferences. We then match that preference against our matrix of wines that have been tested. We can then identify exactly what you specifically are going to like. That's really, really unique when you think about it from a shopping experience. And we can talk about that further, but that is what Tastry does. And we have integrated them into the platform. As a matter of fact, we're going to be going live with this feature in the next handful of days here. So we're really excited to make that announcement. The PR announcement just went out yesterday. So that is who Tastry is, and it gives us a huge competitive advantage in the marketplace while adding a ton of value to the customers.
Great. And then on the vineyard side of things, the producer side of the marketplace, can you talk to us a little bit about the solution you created there, kind of what it does, why it's useful, why it's helpful?
So on this side of things, I actually think that there's quietly more value here to unlock, but it's not as sexy, right? You hear AI and flavor profiles, you're like, wow, that's really, really cool. But when you think about how many vineyards there are just in the United States, and we'll just focus on the US for now, there are thousands and thousands of vineyards that are out there. The vast majority of them will never be able to sell direct consumer in any meaningful way. So right now, how a lot of small to mid-sized vineyards sell, and so we should talk about this, is they encourage people to come to their vineyard, and you'll go as a customer and you'll do a tasting, and the tasting will be a nominal cost, and they'll talk to you about the story and the history and where it comes from and why. And hopefully the goal there for the vineyard is that you'll like it enough to either A, buy some wine, or B, join their wine club. Now that has the highest margin for that vineyard, but it's really slow to scale, right? Because you're physically located in a location, probably the West Coast, either Oregon or California, and you need to somehow figure out how to get the rest of America funneled through your vineyard. A tall task for sure. The next two methods for distribution are brokers selling to restaurants, lower margin, higher volume, and then lastly, the traditional three-tier system where you go through a distributor and a wholesaler and you're sold to retail. What Yahyn allows for is we plug in directly to their point of sale system and their inventory management system. So now they can be direct to consumer to anyone in the United States. So instantly they can increase their audience, have that sort of storytelling vineyard component so that you as a consumer using that AI get recommended their wines, assuming they fit your flavor profile. And on the back end, we handle all the compliance piece, right? The payment processing, how is it being shipped to you? It has to be signed for. Certain states you can sell into, certain states you cannot. So there's some regulatory hurdles there. All of that is actually built into the software. So that you as the vineyard, what do? You wake up every day, you make the best product you possibly can. Remember, wine is agriculture. These are farmers. They make amazing wines and they receive orders from Yahyn. Life is good, right? We handle all of the payment process and the regulatory burden, the compliance, all of that customer service stuff that frankly, they didn't get into wine to be doing those things. That's what we do.
That's great. And, how has the response been so far on both sides of those marketplaces? Kind of how long have you been active and what's the response been?
Yeah, certainly. So we've only been really active and just really ramping up our marketing efforts on both sides of the coin. So I'll start with the vineyard side. We are overwhelmed, frankly, and COVID had a lot to do with this because it really forced the hand of vineyards to think differently about their distribution, and we were a great solution. I'll be the first person to raise my hand and say, we're in the right place at the right time, right? And so because of that, our queue of vineyards right now is north of 120 vineyards that are waiting, that have said, yes, we're in, we want to do it. Now they're just waiting for engineering to add them to the platform. And so what I would say was an overwhelmingly positive response. As a matter of fact, more than expected. So we've exceeded our goals exponentially on that side. As a matter of fact, we're kind of drowning in how to prioritize that queue and get everybody through the queue. On the user side, again, partially because of COVID, I'll again freely admit that, our user growth has been far stronger than we had expected. And so we're growing at about 38%, nearly 40% month over month in terms of new users, which has been phenomenal. And let's kind of talk click-through rates, right? So when we look at some of our digital ads that we put out there, industry average for a good or solid click-through rate from you, a cold eyeball, seeing that ad and clicking on it, 4% is considered like you're doing a great job. We're averaging north of 10%. And right now we have one ad that's just shy of 16%, and it's maintaining that day after day, which is, incredible, right? Our marketing team is like just beside themselves with how effective that's being, which said differently, it's the right service at the right time. And so all things are firing really well. If anything, they're firing a little bit too well, which is why we're trying to do this capital raise to funnel more money into engineering to speed this onboarding process up.
That's awesome. And this is a good time to remind the attendees that if you have any questions for Pierre, please put them in the chat. I know we've got one already, and we're coming up to a good time to ask it. But before we get there, can you just talk a little bit about the market for Yahyn? How big is the market?
Yeah, that's a good one. So the wine market, as many people probably suspect, is quite large. Let's put a number to it. It's just short of 100 billion in the United States alone, right? So it is a massive, massive market. And so there is a lot of room in this market for various players to attack this market in different ways. So you'll see some subscription services out there, Wink, Wall Street Journal, et cetera, that, they address one part of the market. For us, we really focus on bringing really high quality, small to mid-sized boutique wineries to the marketplace. What's been interesting is seeing some larger manufacturers hear about us and they want to come join the party too. And so that's been really encouraging. But the market is absolutely enormous. If you look at Silicon Valley Bank did a fantastic wine report. They do one every single year. It's quite exhaustive, but you can find, I think 2019's is for free if you check out their website. If you can't sleep at night, it's 150 pages on the wine industry. But what you'll notice about it is the trends that are happening within wine. The size of that market is just enormous. But when you think about the digital size of that market, and this is where I think everybody on the call should get excited. This is where I get excited. Only about 5% of wine right now in the United States is sold online. 5%. Now, I'll tell you, because of COVID, that number is growing at an exponential rate, right? Online wine sales are up over 300% since March. But that being said, it's off of a very small number. Most people buy wine by going to their local grocery store and picking up a bottle or two. When you think about that on any other market, transportation, hospitality, mattresses, the Internet of Things has positively disrupted how we distribute those items. Mattresses, to me, is the most obvious. So wine is a huge market with a very small digital presence. I would argue there's not a lot of those markets left that are of this magnitude that really hasn't fundamentally shifted because of the Internet of Things. And we're starting to see that.
That's great. It's really exciting. So,
Yeah.
can we talk a little bit about the business model? Where do you guys make money?
Yeah, certainly. So we charge 14% on all successful transactions. So said differently, 12% of that is paid by the vineyard on the completion of a successful transaction, and 2% is paid by the individual user. So we noticed that within the marketplace, there is a lot of asymmetrical risk, meaning you, the business owner, need to pay for marketing that may or may not work in the hopes that you can sell your product. We've actually taken that burden on and said, no, we're confident in our ability to provide a lot of value to our customers, both our vineyards as well as our users. And so when successful sales happen, we charge 14%, split between those two parties.
Great. And then let's talk a little bit about this raise itself, and then we can get to some, some of these are investor questions as well. So, first of all, what's the running time of this raise?
So I think we're running for a few more months. We're trying to hit our $1 million raise. We're about halfway there already. So we've had a very successful raise already on Netcapital. We've had, I think we're over 2,000 investors. Don't hold me to that, but it's somewhere in that number. And we've raised nearly just shy of $500,000. So about 50% of the way there. So we've had a really successful raise in a short amount of time. So shout out to Netcapital. You guys have been fantastic. Neil Patel, the famous venture capitalist, gave us a big recommendation. So if you go to his site, Angels and Entrepreneurs, they recommended us, which was a big one. King's Crowd, another one that recommends private placement deals. They did their due diligence on us. They gave us a recommendation, and that all drives investors to Netcapital, to us. And so we have had a really successful raise thus far.
Great. And can you talk a little bit about kind of what this raise is? So we had an investor email us in asking, one, about your valuation, and then two, what stage the company is in. Is it a seed stage, Reg A plus, Reg CF, things like that? So, and I'm happy to talk about the regulations as well, if that's helpful for you.
Sure. So I'll leave the reg stuff to you, Rob.
Great.
But we're a seed stage. Our valuation for the company is $5 million. We're doing a $1 million round. We got to that $5 million valuation. It's part art, part science, right? So we look at our team, what we've been able to do, what's the total addressable market size, what are other companies of similar size, maybe in different industries, as comps, if you will. And you look at the power of the board, et cetera, and you kind of put all that into a blender, and we feel that we're right in line with a lot of other companies that are either in our market or outside of our market that are about the same size that we are.
Great. And then just for clarity for all of the investors on the regulations, because an investor asked about whether this was a Reg A. So this is a Reg CF offering. It allows companies to raise up to $1,070,000 from anyone, from the general public, and generally solicit. So there's no accredited investor requirement or things like that. So it's an opportunity for Yahyn to let everyday investors get in on their deal. And it's a really efficient way for them to do it versus a Reg A plus that might have some higher regulatory burdens.
That's right.
And so let's talk a little bit about kind of plans. We have one investor asking about what are the plans for the next 1 to 5 years. And we had another investor asking about, what are potential exit opportunities? So that seems like a good thing. We can kind of talk about both.
Yeah, no, those are fantastic questions. Okay, so we've got a lot in the works. So let me give you the short path. So the website is mobile optimized, but we do not have an app yet. So we have actually started building the app. Here's the thing about app development. It's hard. It's really hard when you have something as complicated as we do with multiple inventory systems running in the background, right? So you've got all these vineyards, you've got retailers, you've got all these things that are running in the background, providing you, the customer, with real-time inventory on top of the AI piece, right? So it is not a small lift to throw together an app. So that's already underway. Knock on wood, we launch that by year end. So that's a big thing for us while we button up the Tastery relationship here over the next couple of days. So that is sort of the short term. Where do we see ourselves 2, 3, and 4 years out after that, right? Then it's a fairly linear path, in my opinion, of what is your cost to customer acquisition? How much do you make on that average customer? Optimize for both of those and turn up the volume, right? Scale, scale, scale. So after that, it becomes, once you started to build the foundation of the community, which we're seeing really positive signs for now, then it's just a question of, can you continue to turn up the volume and take those proceeds and add more customers? And we believe that we're on a very strong trend to be able to do that. That leads you to the next question. What would be an acquisition target for us? Well, we see a handful, and unfortunately I have to be a little bit vague here, but we've already started to build relationships with potential options for exit. So when you think about who out there in the world would care, would really make sense to own Yahyn, think about large conglomerate companies that own a whole portfolio of wines or spirits. So anybody that plays in that space, because you think about it from their perspective, they're able to increase their distribution while simultaneously getting compensated on what their competitors are doing. So you get insight and make money off your competitors. That's pretty attractive if you're an acquiring company, and there's probably a couple that you guys are thinking of right now. So we've started building those relationships already within that space. So those are the ones that we're looking at the most. Some of these are in the luxury brand space. I don't want to hint too much, but they're not people who you would necessarily think own a huge portfolio of wine and spirits, but when you pop the hood a little bit, they actually do. So I'll keep my comments there pretty brief, but I would tell you that we've built some of those relationships. We're going to continue to work on those relationships. We understand that getting acquired is not you wake up one day and you got a bid sitting at your door. It is a process of getting their management team familiar with you, comfortable with your team, comfortable how you build revenue. And it typically is a couple-year process, right?
Yeah, and to follow up on that, we had a more specific question. I know this might be hard to nail down at the moment, but do you have an expected rate of return?
Yeah, so it's such a tough thing to say, right? So if you look at successful startups, they average somewhere between 25x and 100x is not abnormal in the startup space. I have a valuation in mind that I would really like to see out of Yahyn. We'll see if we get there. I'd love to exit the company for $500 million. I mean, that's just my personal preference. I think that that's ultimately the problem that we're addressing in the market is large enough where we can demand that. But that being said, for an expected rate of return from here, right? If we're a $5 million company and we have a $500 million exit, that's a pretty substantial ROI.
Great. And a couple other questions coming in. Is the app developed in the US or is it outsourced? How big is the IT team?
There's a great question. Everything is built in-house in the United States, and it has to be. And here's the reason it has to be. We are compliant to hold credit card information for you, the user. And so from a security standpoint, in order for us to meet outside compliance, first off, we have to be built here in the United States to be able to protect your information and the vineyard's information as well. So that's really, really sensitive. Everything is built here in the United States. What was the second part of that question?
How big is the IT team?
Sure. So the IT team is obviously the largest part of our team. That's head up by Robert. Robert is supported by 5 other engineers and 1 other designer. So it's 7 people in total.
Great. And so circling back to the raise itself, will there be any additional, will additional investments be available after the initial investment at this stage?
We actually have not determined that quite yet. And I would have, if you had asked me 6 months ago, I would have told you, yes, we will do a traditional Series A of 5 to 6 or 7 million, somewhere in that range. 18 months out from the close of this raise. That's what I would have told you 6 months ago. Now, where we're onboarding vineyards faster than we can handle, we're drowning in customers. I don't know. I don't know. We may have the revenue to not have to go raise money. And if I don't have to give away equity, I'd prefer not to. I prefer my team to have that equity, to be honest with you. So I would say TBD. I know you're probably looking for a better answer than that, but everything has really changed in the last 3 months.
Yeah, and so it sounds like, if investors want in, this is an opportunity to get in, and we don't know if there will be one later.
Yeah, that's the short answer. That's right.
Great. Circling back to the app for a minute, what technology does the app use, or how are you planning to build it? What are you planning to build it on?
Yeah, good question. So our website, and this is also true for the app, everything is built from the ground up on Ruby on Rails. So just to be clear, in a day and an age where a lot of companies just take a whole bunch of software, white label it, and stitch it all together, that's not what we do. And the reason is we can't do that. The front end cost is much higher doing it the way we did it. We understand that. However, when it comes to plugging into all these various inventory systems, and you're talking about thousands of vineyards and hundreds of retailers, you need that flexibility and the security. You got to have both. And so we built everything up from Ruby. The app is no different. It will pull from that Ruby database. We will outsource our OCR tech. It doesn't make sense to build it in-house. So there are some things that it makes more sense to outsource. So our OCR tech, that's for image recognition, text image recognition specifically, that's coming along, but we'll outsource for that piece. But the app will have all of that integrated into it.
Perfect. So one other question came in earlier. Do you read all of the investor feedback and user comments, and what have you been getting so far?
Yeah, so I try to. I really, really try to understand that it comes in a lot of different ways. And so if I miss somebody, I very much apologize. We're on multiple forums, plus social media, plus email, plus a chat bot that we have on the site. And by the way, our chat service, you're talking to real people. Those are real people who work at Yahyn in our office. There's no bots. There's no third party in there. That's us. So shout out to Natalie and some of the folks over there that are answering those things. The response has been overwhelmingly positive. I would say the biggest feedback that we get is faster, right? Like, this is so cool. I want more now. Like, when is it going to be ready? When is it going to be ready? Well, when's this next piece? When's this next feature? People really like what we're building. And I will tell you, we are going as fast as humanly possible. But the consumer feedback has been, they can't wait for those next pieces. And so, which is great and encouraging, but we hear you. I listen to as many of them as I possibly can. I really appreciate them. Quick shout out to a few of you who have written really heartfelt, deep pieces of feedback, not just one or two lines, but we've received some that were paragraphs long with fantastic ideas, and we've taken those ideas and run with them. So that stuff's really valuable to us, everybody. If you've got feedback or thoughts about something, please, there's a feedback tab on Yahyn. You can go to the Netcapital site and leave feedback there, and we try to address all those questions and feedback as it comes in. But that stuff's really, really, really important to us. So thank you.
Thanks, Pierre. Bunch of more questions coming in, and thanks to all the investors who are asking questions right now. Keep them coming. We have a little bit more time, so make sure you keep piling them in here, and we'll get them answered as quickly as we can. So the next one up is, are there any thoughts to strategically align with established organizations who have committed to pre-launch distribution, national and global rewards programs, things like that?
Yes. My lawyer will jump out of the ceiling at any minute if I mention who they are, because they're the 800-pound gorilla in the space. But the short answer is, yeah, absolutely. That more to follow. I can't say yet, but I will tell you the relationship that is on the near term, 60 days or less, is one of the largest in the wine space, period, and will really make waves in the industry. So we're super, super excited to announce that offering, that deal.
Great. We'll keep an eye out for it. And a question that I can answer is, will the recording be sent to people? So those who could not attend live will have the opportunity to listen to this replay. The answer is yes, Sam. So we're going to send this to all Netcapital users in a recording. It'll also be hosted on YouTube. So there'll be plenty of opportunities to rewatch this for anyone who wasn't able to attend today. So if you're watching this as a recording, thanks for taking the time.
Rob,
Go ahead, Pierre.
One small thing around questions. So if you go to the Netcapital Yahyn site and see our offering on Netcapital, and you can see the form of other questions that have been asked there, just so that everybody knows, the two people that answered those questions with Rob's help is my CFO and me. So the answer you are getting is from us, and we respond as quickly as we possibly can. So we really, really appreciate that feedback. I got to say it again, just because we've gotten some great ideas, and there's no better voice to listen to than you. You're the consumer, right? So we want to make sure that we're addressing those, and we really think that it's valuable. I can't overstate that.
Great. And thanks, Sam. You can share this with other potential investors. So keep an eye out for that. If anyone's not already signed up on netcapital.com, please do that, because that'll make sure you get you'll receive our weekly update email, and you'll get all the information about Yahyn and any other companies that are live on our site. We've got at least one more question. If anyone else has others, please throw them in here just to make sure we can get to them. So the question from this attendee is this raised primarily to build out the app? What is the time frame to get the app developed? And then if you do not raise the $1 million, what is the priority for allocation of funds? Marketing, app development, things like that.
Yeah, that's a great question. So we are pretty confident that we're going to raise the $1 million. I can say that from just having relationships with outside angels and VC firms that are also courting us at the same time. We see a strong advantage. Quick side note: people ask us sometimes, I'm a VC guy. Josh, my CFO, is a VC guy. 3 out of the 4 board members are from the VC space. Why didn't you go to VC? Why did you choose crowd over VC? It's an interesting choice, right? We see a tremendous amount of value by going through a Netcapital. Why? And I'm going to be very selfish here for 1 second, because as regular folks come on and make investments, what do you guys do? You check out the website. You tell friends. You might buy wine from the website. We now have thousands of mini marketers, right? People who have invested in Yahyn on the Netcapital platform are now invested sort of emotionally in our success, which means they want to tell their friends about it. They want to buy on the site and support us. That's a lot of value. And that goes back to the feedback comment as well. We now have a ton of feedback across multiple platforms, not just from investors, but from people who decide not to invest at that moment. And that's fine too. That represents a huge amount of value, as opposed to working with a VC who might have 1 or 2 people that will try to help us attain value. So we made a judgment call here, and we believe that this is the right way to go about it.
I know we certainly appreciate that, Pierre. That looks like all the questions we have for today.
Hold on.
Go ahead.
I didn't fully finish answering his question about the capital is deployed. So I apologize. I want to get to that. So most of it is engineering. So greater than 60%, to define most, goes to engineering. Of that 60% spent on engineering, more than half of it is spent on the app development. The other sort of chunk, the other third, if you will, is to wrap up the Tastery integration and a few other on this piece, with the completion date targeted for Jan 1 for the app specifically. So that is where about 65 cents on every dollar goes in that direction. The rest is broken predominantly into marketing spend. The interesting thing about the marketing spend is we have 2 marketing spends: users and vineyards. Our vineyard marketing spend has been reduced to 0. Our cost of customer acquisition on the vineyard side is now 0. So we've been able to redeploy that capital towards gaining more users. I believe that part of fantastic marketing, great marketing, is better than average customer service. So what do I define as better than average customer service? We recently had a customer come to us. They're perusing the website. They hop on the chat. They're chatting away with some folks at Yahyn about various wine, helping find stuff. And in that chat sequence, we find out that this gentleman is buying 2 bottles of wine because his son's birthday is coming up in a few days. So the folks over on my customer service team take it upon themselves to go send cupcakes, cookies, and flowers in time for the birthday so that the wine gets there, and we thank them for allowing Yahyn to be part of their birthday celebration. That's real customer service, right? That's customer experience. And that person is now so likely to rave about us that it increases our ability to generate new customers. And if you don't quite buy into that concept, let me quick sidebar. There's a company called Zappos, right? Most people have heard of Zappos. They sell other people's shoes. Highly commoditized, super thin margins. Zappos was able to be acquired for north of $1 billion by Amazon, predicated on one thing: insane customer service. They built their whole business selling other people's shoes based on one premise, which is incredible customer service and a customer client experience. That's it. That's all. And yet they were able to build a massive user base and have a very successful exit. So don't overlook something as simple as customer service. It's actually really critical, and it's a huge part about how we talk internally on the culture of Yahyn. Wine is romantic. It's part of life's exclamation points, right? Think about when you drink wine. It's with friends, it's with a loved one, spouse, celebrations, promotions, graduations. That's when you experience these sort of moments of celebration. Customer service means even more during those times. So not to be overlooked, but part of those dollars are allocated to marketing. And I view amazing customer service as a key piece of marketing. So a chunk of those dollars is there. Sorry for the long-winded answer, but I'm obviously passionate about this stuff. And so I wanted to give a complete answer.
No, that's great, Pierre. It's much appreciated. That's all the questions we have for today. We really appreciate you taking the time to sit with us and answer questions. Any kind of parting thoughts for any investors, attendees, potential investors, potential customers?
Yeah, yes. So please check out our offering on Netcapital. We really appreciate you taking a look at the deals, take a look at our team, what we've built so far. We appreciate all the comments and the feedback. If we don't have to raise a second round, we're not going to, just to be clear. So this might be your only shot at ever investing into Yahyn, and we're about halfway there already, and thousands of investors agree. And we've gotten some huge accolades just recently in the past 24 hours. So we're really, really excited for our progress. We want to finish this raise strong, deploy that capital, and just dominate and scale in our space.
That's fantastic. Well, Pierre, we appreciate you taking the time. Oh, it looks like we have one more.
Speak it in.
So there was a final question. Sai, sorry. If you have additional questions for Pierre, you can ask on the discussion board on netcapital.com. That's the way everyone can have access to the answers. And but we appreciate your questions so far, and we'd love to have you to continue the discussion on the discussion board. So yeah, with Pierre, with that, thanks again for joining. Thanks to all of the attendees for your fantastic questions, super insightful. I feel like we really got to dig in. And yeah, check out netcapital.com and check out Yahyn. And if it feels right, feel free to make an investment. Thanks again, everybody.
Thank you very much.
Take care.